Peter, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Where are you phoning in from?
Well, I'm in North Norfolk in the UK, and it's a lovely sunny day today. It's
Lovely.
unusual.
Is that a rare treat? I'm also from the UK, and is it a rare treat having a little bit of sunshine?
Well, it's like a lottery here. We could either be really sunny or it could be really grey and miserable.
Love it.
Being on the coast, it's great. Whatever the weather is, there's always something interesting.
Love it. Quite possibly the most important question for our conversation. What's your coffee order for when I can jet back home to the UK and buy a coffee?
I don't drink coffee, I drink tea.
Lovely.
So yeah, I'm an English breakfast tea person.
Amazing. Lovely. We've got a cupboard full of Yorkshire tea bags in my house. And so I love a strong tea. Do you like strong tea or more of an Earl Grey kind of guy?
More of a strong tea. We used to have PG tips in our
Love
postgrad
that.
office, and we used to call them postgraduate tips.
Lovely. And a book that's caused you to stop and reconsider a few things in your life. It could be within your area of expertise, or it could be more broadly.
No, I think a book that The Cross and the Switchblade by David Wilkerson, and it was the first book I ever read from cover to cover, and yeah, so that was the book that made me see the world differently.
Lovely. And something that you've changed your mind about this year.
What, this year or ever?
Let's go ever.
Ever. Okay, so the thing that changed my mind ever was changing my mind from believing I was stupid to believing that I wasn't stupid. And that was a moment of a mind shift, which changed everything.
And when would you say that occurred? Was that early on in your sort of school life, or was that later on?
Well, that was in my early 20s. So yeah, that changed. That was the beginning of reading for me. That was that
Fantastic.
moment.
And you partially answered this question, but what were you like at school? What was your experience of school like?
I hated school. Oh my word, I hated it. And
Right.
yeah, so my experience of school was just hideous. And well, it was bittersweet actually, because I hated school. I hated all the sitting down and reading and learning stuff because I couldn't read and write very well. And so I always felt really stupid because I couldn't engage in those sort of learning activities. But my school had a dance group, and when I was in the dance group, I felt completely different, and school felt like a wonderful place. So yeah, the golden thread through education for me, from primary school through secondary school, has been the dancing that's been available. And I felt really lucky that I've had those opportunities. But the rest of it, I hated.
Do you remember how you felt when you first discovered that? What was that experience of first discovering what dance was like?
It just felt like it just felt like I could be me. I mean, it was just the representation of who I was. And I felt completely me when I danced. And there was no friction, and there was no pretend, there was no awkwardness. It just felt, I guess some people might say it was like a flow-like state, though when I was,
Wow.
6, 7, 8 years old, I wouldn't have described it in that way. But that's kind of how it was. It just felt everything that felt right, and it made everything else feel wrong. Those
Yeah.
other states. So yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, to experience. Yeah, it's wonderful.
That's really beautiful, and it's so lovely to see all these years later, your face light up when you talk about that experience. I think
Uh-huh.
it's really beautiful. So I guess looking back, you wouldn't have thought that you would have gone into a career of academia or become a
Oh,
doctor. Like that seemed does that seem would that have seemed crazy at the time?
oh my word, that would have been completely crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, completely stupid to believe that that would have been my path. Yeah, no, 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 none of that at all. I wasn't one of the clever ones at school, and I didn't engage in any of the reading and writing activities. And so any career which might have required me to read and write would have been considered completely
Wow.
off limits.
Wow. I have so many questions, Peter. That's really lovely to hear how you explain that. So how on earth did a dancer end up as a psychologist? How did that happen?
Well, okay, so that happened in a
It seems bizarre.
it is, yeah, I guess it is bizarre. So I was working as a professional dancer, and so I left school without any qualifications and went to train as a dancer. I worked in musical theatre shows, and so that was my life. I was a dancer, and I was working around, traveling around the world, working and having a fantastic time.
Amazing.
And there was this moment I described just a bit earlier where I had this change, which changed everything in my life. And the change was this realization that I wasn't stupid. I was in my early 20s. And up until that point, I genuinely believed that I was stupid, incapable of learning, and thick. And not only that, I had certificates in failure. I obviously failed so much at school that I had these school certificates which certified that I was a failure. My significant others knew that I was stupid because they knew I couldn't read and write. And So that was who I was. We all carry our personalities around with us, and those personalities are formed by our significant others. They're formed by our school teachers. They're formed by our school peers. They're formed by all of those people who are around us all the time. So that was who I was, right? And there was a moment where I was doing a show in London, and there was a 2 week rehearsal period, and we came in for the rehearsal period, and the musicians had their musical director with them, and they had their sheets of music in front of them, their musical director. They had a couple of weeks of rehearsing, going through all the music and the songs. And on the opening night of the show, they'd be in the orchestra pit with their conductor keeping them in time, with their music in front of them if they needed it, and they could play the score. Absolutely great. Now, the actors did something a little bit harder than that. So the actors had to learn their script, and they read off the book, and they eventually put their book down, and they got off the book. And on the opening night, they could recite their lines. And if they forgot their lines, somebody in prompt corner would shout the line out to them. But as dancers, we had to do something completely different. We just had to remember, right? So a choreographer would say, right, we're going to have one of these, and a boom, 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 boom. And we just had to remember it, and you did it. And not only had you do sort of 8 counts, you had to do 2 hours worth of choreography. And
Wow.
you couldn't write it down. You couldn't film yourself in those days. You just had to remember it. And then on the opening night of the show, there was no conductor to keep you in time, and there was nobody in prompt corner shouting out what the next move was. You just had to remember this complex patterns of movement, some picking people up, putting them down, and moving around to sometimes in silence, sometimes music on your own with other people. Oh, the amount of content to remember is humongous, but you do it. And I had this moment. I thought, blimey, if I'm capable of doing all of that, then I can't be stupid. And then I thought, well, if I'm not stupid, then maybe I can learn to read. Because you
Yeah,
think, well,
wow.
if previously I thought I was too stupid to learn to read, and there was aspects of reading that were so inconsistent, I
Mm.
thought it was me who was like the idiot, not being able to comprehend these
Mm.
different meanings of words and things. And then I realized that I wasn't stupid. And I thought, oh, well, if I'm not stupid, then maybe I can learn to read and write.
Wow.
So I was in my early 20s then, and kind of set about this journey of learning to read and write. And of course, that whole journey is fraught with, well, it's fraught with a whole set of stuff to do with reinforcing the idea that you're not very good, because it doesn't happen overnight. You have to learn. The reading material is often aimed at really young people, and you know,
Yeah.
the whole lot. Well, we'll talk about that later. All the kind of struggle. So I've eventually started to break down the patterns of reading and the problems of reading, and then I did an A level. So I started to read books, and so the first book I read was The Cross and the Switchblade,
Wow.
and it took forever to read this book, and I don't think I understood half of it, but I got through to the end of the book, and then I read another book, and then another book, and another book, and so I thought, oh, well, if I can read these books, so I can understand some of what's going on in these books, and then I then in a moment we can talk about how that process worked, but just as an overview. I then did an A level in psychology, and I got a D, A level grade D, my delightful D, and I was delighted because it was a pass. It wasn't a fail, and so I applied for university, and they all said no. And so the next year I did another A level. I did an A level in English, which I failed, and I'd never passed an English exam. I'd failed, GCSE O level English, and I'd failed it because we had to. I'd failed it every time we had to do it, and so I did the A level in English and failed that. And luckily, a university offered me a place to study psychology and English on the back of my grade D, my delightful D for psychology. And
Wow.
so I did my first degree in that. And then at the end of that, I was very lucky to win a scholarship to do a master's degree in neural computation, so the mathematical modeling of brain functions. And then at the end of that, I was very lucky again to get offered another scholarship to do my PhD in experimental cognitive neuroscience. And then after that, I was then at Cambridge University, and I was in the Faculty of English at Cambridge University. And I felt like a bit of a fraud there because I'd failed my English O level loads of times, and I hadn't passed my English A level, but I managed to have a degree in psychology and English. So yeah, so
What
then I was at Cambridge.
an incredible story. And once again, Peter, I have so many questions, but that takes an incredibly determined and intelligent and brave individual to be able to do that. I think there'd be so many people, myself included, that if I got that fail, I would give up. But that is an incredible lesson in perseverance and just being incredibly brave. I mean, do you view that as amazing and brave and brilliant, or did you just sort of, are you just respectfully stubborn and you wanted to pass and you just refused to take no for an answer?
I mean, sometimes you have to be a little bit stupid to succeed because you have to overlook the logic and go, okay, so yeah, I failed and failed and
Yeah.
failed, but maybe I can pass something. And it's that that kind of keeps the resilience going. And you go, well,
Mm.
let's try again, let's try again, let's try again.
I love
And
that.
it was that sense of, um, I, yeah, yeah, failing yeah. I
It's
was very lucky. I've been really lucky that I've had opportunities to keep going. And the failing, you see, some of it is a stubborn thing. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking very eloquently or fluently because I'm
No, I've been
without
told I'm
very well.
annoyingly stubborn and optimistic, but I think that's not a bad quality to have.
I think you've got to have it.
Yeah, I
To do a
love that.
PhD, someone once says when they look at somebody with a PhD, they look at someone like yourself who's run a marathon. You just have to keep going. And the thing with the PhD, you just have to keep going, like running a marathon. You've just got to keep
Yeah,
going. And if you get cramp, tummy ache, dehydrated, you've got to take some water, keep
you
going.
keep going.
Yeah, and I think for me that was that idea that, and I felt like I had a lot to prove. I
Mm.
wanted going through that notion of thinking, okay, so I felt like I wasn't stupid, and then I learned to read, and then I think, well, lots of people can read. So you go, how do I convince all these people who think I'm stupid that I'm not stupid?
I love
And
that.
the place to be is at Cambridge University, and
If you're going to go anywhere, that's a good one.
well, that was the place that was for me. It was like being a mountaineer, thinking, okay, I want to prove that I can climb the highest mountain. What's the highest mountain for me for this particular challenge?
Yeah,
And so I applied to Cambridge
interesting.
every step, and I got rejected at every step leading up to that. So of course I applied like an idiot with one A level grade D. I applied to Cambridge, and they said no. Of course they said no. But I applied. Master's level, I applied. They said no. PhD level, I went there for an interview. So I was interviewed for a PhD scholarship there and didn't get the scholarship, so didn't get the place. And again, so that was that stage. And then for my postdoc, it was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to apply now for an academic post, and then got the academic post. And then my mum got really fed up because I went there. And, what was really interesting about being there was there were loads of people who, my academic colleague called John, we published some papers together, and we used to walk around the different colleges at lunchtime, go to different chapels. And one day he said to me, "Oh, I want to be buried here. I want to be buried in this college chapel, in this, In... And I said, you really?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is where I want to end my days here." And he was only in his late 30s. And it filled me with horror that he was going to spend the rest of his academic life in this place and then be buried in the chapel there. And I thought, oh no, I can't be doing that. I need to go. And so I then left.
Peter, what are you most proud of during that time of your life? Is it the perseverance? Is it the this sort of deep sense and belief that you had something to contribute when other people thought you didn't? Like, what is it that you look back and go, geez, I'm really proud of myself for that?
I don't know that I'm very proud of myself for any of those things. I think probably just the deciding to learn to read. I think that
I,
that was the thing.
I love
Because
that. My girls are in kindergarten and year two, and I always say to them, reading is a superpower. And one of my greatest joys is hearing them fall asleep at night, laughing at books as they're reading them. And I think I remember my life was transformed. I used to sit in at this tiny little library in Belper and in Nottingham and just read these books. And at the time, family life wasn't great, but I remember reading the stories of the BHG and Roald Dahl and the Matilda and just being reading just transporting me to a world that was so beyond my reality. I remember, and it sounds a little sad, but I remember some of my best friends in the world were characters in books, and I just loved it, and I love that you were just so determined to do that, and I'm actually really proud of you. Like I know it's a strange thing to say to somebody on a Zoom call, but it's so inspirational because I know that there are so many people that have sat in classrooms that have had a really poor experience of school and will relate to your story. And I think it's really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really beautiful. How on earth can pirouettes boost your brain?
well, they movement.
How?
Now, well,
Tell me.
humans are born to move, and the
Yeah.
human brain is specialized for movement. And yet we
Okay.
restrict the brain. Human brain is specialized for movement. The human body is specialized for movement as well. And yet we create a society where we try to stop people from moving as much as possible. Now, of course, the brain is this wonderful, wonderful thing. So that when you stimulate one part of it, it activates other parts of the brain.
Love
And
it.
of course, the different parts of the brain, we're not being reductionists where we believe this part of the brain is only responsible for this function. We know that lots of things happen in the brain all over the place. So the bits that are underpinning movement are also underpinning thinking and problem solving and
Mm.
social interaction and spatial awareness. There's a whole range of different things that happen when we activate different parts of the brain. So if we look at the premotor cortex, for instance, you've got this premotor cortex and leading on to the motor cortex. And the motor cortex is that sense of where all the movement comes from. So the premotor cortex is this urge to move. And the motor cortex is the thing that makes us move. And of course, when that becomes stimulated, that activates other areas of the brain. So that we know, for instance, that even just feeling the groove, hearing a groovy tune and having a sense of that groove, that urge to move to a rhythm without even having to do very much, then that stimulates the frontal lobes of the brain. And so, of course,
Gosh.
then you've got all this stuff on executive functioning happening. And so it stimulates those functions. So, yeah, we know that dancing and moving our body just has this amazing impact on our brain. And if we just let ourselves do that, now, and this is why different types of movement have different impacts on different areas of the brain.
So they're not all equal. Movement is not equal.
No, 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 no.
Love
And
that.
this is why, no, when people say, oh, dance is good for you, you go, well, actually, as a headline, we say, yes, it is. But actually, the subtext is, well, the dancing isn't good for us, right? Dancing isn't the thing. It's the thing that's within the dancing, which is good for us. So, the movement, synchronizing our movement with other people, either moving in a structured way or moving in an unplanned way is really good for us. Feeling, connecting, that the sense of sensory motor coupling, sensory information like sound coming in and activating something in our brain. Then, of course, this applies to hearing music, but it also applies to hearing people speak, and it applies to interpersonal interactions. So all of those things are active. So yeah, in dance, it's really hard to define exactly what dance is. But if we were to say, it's the things within dance that are having the impact on us. And this is why we can finesse it now and to say, oh, well, let's introduce this element of dance into this particular space if we want to enhance this particular behavior or this particular type of thinking or emotion or interaction. Or if we want to create a different environment where we want to create a different sense of feeling, then we use a different sort of movement to do that. And so, yeah, so that's why dance is so fascinating
I
and so
love that.
effective.
Uh,
Dance isn't just one thing.
Is that what I believe it's Samuel Beckett that said, dance first, think later? It's the
Yeah,
natural.
it
I
is
love that.
absolutely. And those two things are so tightly linked together, the dancing, the moving and the thinking. And this is why I find it bizarre that in schools, well, not just in schools, but in society in general, in lots of workplaces too, we say to people, right, sit still and work. And
It's
it's
the
almost as if
worst.
we're saying, like, sit still in case all the clever stuff will fall out of your head if you move, right? And so we say, don't move your body because the clever stuff will fall out. Just stay still, and work. Look at this page and be still and only move your hand to write. Don't fidget. Don't stand up. Don't move around. Don't bump into other people because it's unruly. But no, the opposite is true. I think, of course, for crowd control, we need people to sit still. But for learning and thinking, then the research seems to show that moving is a stimulator for all of those wonderful things.
Peter, is it movement specifically, or is there something particularly unique about dance, about the music and the movement and the collaboration? Is dance particularly unique?
Well, I would suggest that so human movement is natural to all of us. And I believe that dance is different because dance is an innate behavior. And so to have an innate behavior, it has to have been universal. And of course, dance is universal. Even cultures that have never met one another, they
Mm.
dance. We have to know that it has to be, something that's really fundamental to humans. It doesn't need to be taught. And we know that little babies, when they hear a rhythm, they move their bodies to those rhythms. So it's a natural thing. It's entirely, you haven't got to be taught how to dance. Dancing happens to all of us. And I think dancing is different to other forms of movement. So I think that it's fundamental there. And now, with dance being one of the innate activities, it's really odd that our society has shut it down and tries to control it so very, very much. Now, one of the reasons that dance is so important is because it stimulates four areas of human behavior. It stimulates social interaction with other people, and dance we can measure it on the dimension of how social it is. It stimulates our thinking. So we know that when we move our body, it changes the way that we think and solve problems. We know that dance is emotional in two ways. One, it can be very cathartic in terms of us releasing emotion, but it's also amazing at communicating emotion. So before we had verbal language, we were communicating our feelings through movement, which means that the respondent's brain must be picking up those movement signals and interpreting them. So our brains are not only designed for us to move, our brains are also created to be able to understand other people's movements and interpret those. And the final thing is that dancing has an impact on us physically. Now, of course, we know that moving our body is a physical act, but it also has an impact on neurochemicals, our hormones, that level of physicality. So for those reasons, now some sporting activities that are not innate stimulate some of those areas, but dancing is fairly unique in stimulating all four of those in lots of different situations. And so that's why I think dance is different.
What would you say to someone, Peter, that just says, I'm just not a dancer?
No, they are. Humans are born to dance.
Yeah.
It's like someone saying, I'm not an eater. I'm not an eater. Oh, you are. You're born to eat. I'm not a lover. Well, you are. You're born to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think they are now. This is again a social thing that people have been. Part of the problem with dance is that we have this very natural expression of movement, the sort of dance we're born to do. And then we have society's version of what dance is. So, of course, doing ballet, no one's born to do ballet. No one's born to do any of those sort of dances because they're so heavily taught and they're technique based, and it's possible to get them wrong. So lots of people say to me, "Oh no, I don't dance." And I go, "Why don't you dance?" And they go, "Oh, when I was 10 years old, I was laughed at for dancing." And you go, "Oh, okay." Or the very worst one is where people are told they're the wrong shape, they're told they're the wrong sex, they're told they're the wrong sexuality. They're told they're the wrong everything. It seems to be that people think that to be a dancer or to dance, you need to belong within a certain identifiable category which is nonsense. But our society thinks that. And so people think they're the wrong sort of person to dance. They go, I'm too old to dance. Too old to dance. That just says that our society says that dancing is for a certain type of child. And but of course, so I have this big thing with dance. And I like to think of it as like eating. So eating is an innate behavior, just like dance, and we need eating for our survival. Whereas with our movement, of course, we're all born to move, but we've created this way of moving where it's incredibly utilitarian, a functional movement. We only do the movement that's required to do the task that we're trying to do. So that's all we do. And doing anything that's more creative than that is seen as really odd socially. Well, imagine if our eating was the same as our movement, in that utilitarian functional way. All we'd eat is the food that astronauts eat. We would only eat to keep ourselves alive. But when you think about eating, we eat for pleasure. We smell it, we taste it, we touch it, we move food around. Sometimes we go out with our friends and eat socially. We celebrate with food with other people. Sometimes we grab a quick functional sandwich, we're feeling a bit peckish. Sometimes we eat to indulge ourselves in stuff that isn't very good for us, but we love the feeling of it. So the way we eat is this very rich tapestry of experiences that we have. Virtually all of the senses are engaged when we eat food. The same might be said of lovemaking as well. I mean, it's a similar innate activity. Well, what if we were to apply that same variety to our movement as well? And so rather than just having bland astronaut food in our sense of movement, just doing the movement that's required to get the job done, what if we allowed ourselves to move in a way and to make it multisensory, to move differently, to experience movement with other people, to have movement parties to celebrate things, to have movement parties when someone was sad, solo movement, group movement, movement just to indulge ourselves, and movements because we're in a particular type of mood. You need a movement snack because we're feeling a bit. So I think, if we were to. So when people say they're not a dancer, I think, no. You are a dancer. We are all dancers. Humans are born to dance. And what you're not doing, you're not allowing natural movement, the natural movement you're born with, that your brain is specialized for, to come through you. And that's where I think we should move more.
Think that is Peter, that is a wonderful answer to that question. If you could redesign a typical school day with movement in mind, what would you change?
Oh, I'd change.
Everything.
Well, maybe there would be an opportunity. Maybe we would let's start by freeing the movement up. So we have more opportunities to move throughout the day. Maybe we would have some standing desks. Now, of course, there are some people who won't be able to stand, and there are some people who have to sit down all during the day. But what if we were to tailor, you know, like what if we introduced movement breaks every 20 minutes? What if we, during a classroom setting, that people went no more than 15, 16, 17 minutes without moving? And so they're just like using micro movements. Let's imagine we added in some micro movements into the learning experience. So, we kind of think about, movement. Let's have people standing up in a classroom. Let's allow people to move around while they're thinking, while they're generating ideas, while they're sharing ideas with other people. What if people could just leave the classroom to go to the loo whenever they liked, and and then come back in again? Now, I recognise that I'm speaking naively. Of course, I've got this kind of utopian idea of what an education system would be like. I'm not an educationalist in that way. I've taught in universities all my life. But wouldn't it be great if we could allow people to move more freely? If we had, people could fidget if they wanted. They could move their bodies if they wanted. And I think the classroom, you see, if we only start with the classroom, then I don't think we'll get very far. I think we have to go back to the broader society and think about movement generally. We have to make sure that if we're going to have a free movement classroom, we need to make sure that the person running that classroom is completely comfortable with their own movement and sharing their own movement and encouraging other people to move. And for
Mm,
that person to be free in their movement, then the person who's running the school
love
has to
that.
be, somebody who understands freedom of movement and allowing people to express themselves in different
Yeah,
ways.
I think that's really beautiful, Peter. I get nervous with dancing, and it's something which you and your work has inspired me to overcome. And I think the thing that makes me a little bit nervous is just how, when we're moving, just how vulnerable we are, that vulnerability. And it could be, I think for me, many years ago, I remember I was dancing and somebody laughed at me, and I think that was a moment for me that I think really shaped and also knocked my confidence a little bit in movement. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure there's people listening to this that are like, oh, I wish I had the freedom and the expression and the confidence that you do. What would you say to those people, and myself included? And how can we begin to kind of flex our dancing muscle or muscles?
Well, firstly, I think it is such a common experience for people to say that they are anxious about moving their bodies in new ways. They
Mhm.
feel that they're displaying something, they feel they might be judged. And then when people are criticized or laughed at for moving their body in a particular way, it really gets to the heart of who they are. Because dancing is a fundamental part of our human makeup, then it's like somebody laughing at the look of our face or the size or shape of our body. It's that kind of fundamental to who we are. I'd say there are ways to find your natural movement. There was a chap, well, two things to say. I did one survey where I asked people why they do or don't dance. And we had over 1,000 people telling us why
Wow.
they don't dance. And one of the stories was this boy who was at a primary school. And he said that, everyone was taking it in turns to dance. They were dancing some Michael Jackson or something. And then they took it in turns to go across the floor, starting in one corner and moving across the floor. And he was loving it, really having a great time. And then he heard the people laughing. And he was thinking, why are people laughing? I've obviously missed the joke as he was dancing across. And then when he got to the other side, he realized that they were laughing at him. And he said he's never danced since.
That's awful.
And it was in that moment where he was thoroughly enjoying himself, but then other people judged him. Now, so I would say to get comfortable. Now, then another chap came to me, a German guy from Germany, and he came over to my lab at the university when I had it there. And he said, look, my wife laughs at me when I dance. I used to love dancing, but she laughs at me. I said,
Oh,
oh, how come? And so we started just dancing. And he, honestly, the tension in his body, he had this
oh gosh.
humongous amount of tension in his body. And if you've ever tried to move freely with all of your muscles as tense as they could be,
Mm.
then your natural rhythm isn't going to come out. And
Yeah.
he was saying, oh, can you teach me some steps? And it wasn't about teaching him some steps. It was about getting rid of that anxiety from his body, loosening up his muscles so that when we go back to the most basic exercise, which is feeling a groove, you play some music and you just see where in your body moves. It might be deep inside your body that finds that groove. You put your favorite piece of music on. And then, for me, it'd be something like, Rapper's Delight. Dum, dum, dum. Dum, 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 dum. And when I hear that, this groove kind of comes through my body and I can feel it. I can just feel the groove. I haven't got to do very much. It's just there inside my body. Now, of course, when people can find that groove, nobody else might see it, which is wonderful. They can just sit in a chair with their eyes closed or lay on their bed with their eyes closed and find that groove. And that's the kernel, that's the initial thing. And when people get that kernel, and then they can start making the movement bigger. They can externalize it. They can move their limbs on that beat. They can stand up and they can do it. They can do it in a mirror with themselves. They can do it with other people. There's a whole graded program you could go through from that, finding that groove, getting rid of some tension, and the moving. So if you've got a favorite piece of music that you love, no, no, I know what you should do. Because you disclosed earlier on that you have, well, I better tell you in case you want to cut this bit out. Is it okay to say that you've got children?
Yes, of course.
Okay, okay. So you've got children and they're young, they're kindergarten, and dance with them. The way that you read with them, dance with them. Just put some music on because they will move their bodies in an uninhibited way, probably.
I
And
love
then
that.
just go with them and improvise with them. Be
We've
led by
started
their
doing that.
movement.
It's been lovely. Yeah, we our lounge room. Our house is quite small, but our lounge room sort of doubles as a wrestling ring and a dance studio, and like it's incredible. And I think whenever I see them move, I actually get quite emotional because I've spent my career working in kindergarten, or a huge amount of my career working in kindergarten, year one and year two spaces. And you see kids move with these without any ambitions, without any,
Yeah.
they're completely confident and absorbed in what they do. And unfortunately, as we progress into adulthood, we lose that. But I mean, you seem to have bucked the trends somewhat, Peter. Like you seem to be getting more expressive and more youthful. I've seen your Instagram videos, and do you ever get self-conscious or do you just think, whatever, I'm putting it out into the world?
Yeah, this is who I am. I mean, I dance, if people want, no, I guess, no, I don't get self-conscious anymore. Sometimes it's funny when I go into a public space and I think, right, I'm going to dance in this public space. Sometimes I think, oh, blimey, they might. But then I get out and I go, no, 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 come on, Peter, you've got to be you. And
Love that.
if you've got a speaking voice, you speak. And if you've got a movement voice, you move. I mean, you use what you've got. And I'm an advocate for moving in different ways. And I think if I can inspire one person to maybe move differently, and that might lead to some positive change in their life, even a fleeting moment of, one of the things I was working on at the university, we were working with people with Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder which leads to a range of movement-related problems. And a piece of research was published in 2005, which showed that when people with Parkinson's took part in recreational dance, then it led to an improvement in their symptoms. And at first we didn't believe this. We thought, well, that's nonsense. So we set up a lab and we tested it and we found that it was the case that when people with Parkinson's dance, it leads to an improvement in their symptoms, which is really, 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 really important for people with this kind of condition. And what it led to a range of interpersonal changes, their mood changes, their balance, their walking speed, a whole range of differences. But when we were running our clinical trials, some people said, oh, no, I don't want to take part in that because I don't dance. And we said, oh, well, we'll work with you on the dancing. You don't have to be a dancer. It's just movement. We're going to get you moving in different ways. And some people's prejudice about dance led them not to take part in it. And when you look at the profound impact it has on people's lives from doing it, it makes me really sad that people don't do it. And I think if they're not doing it because there's this social stigma against dancing, where people think you have to be, young, I don't know, certain characteristics to dance, then part of my role is to demonstrate to people, look, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how ungainly you are, it doesn't matter how big your belly is or anything. If you dance, then everyone can dance. And so part of my ambition in life is to demonstrate people that literally anybody, everybody is a dancing, moving body. And then maybe, kids in school, if they can get some benefit from moving their body, if that helps them to learn to read or helps them learn to think or helps them learn to interact with other people or, then that'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? So that's why I don't really care. If people laugh, then that's their issue, not my issue.
I love that, Peter. And
Well,
I
that's
think
school.
I think so many more people need to have that view. It's the people that laugh are the ones with the issues, not the ones that are embracing who they are. I think that's beautiful. Peter, what advice would you give to yourself, that little boy who was sitting in a school all those years ago feeling that, in your words, that they were stupid and unable to contribute anything. What would you say to that little boy?
You're not
Yeah.
just because they can't read. It's not a reflection. The reading system we use, I now know that it doesn't make sense, and so I can laugh at it. But as a kid, I just really believed that my inability to engage with the written system was, I was the only person who couldn't engage with that. And I wish there had been someone then from the future who could have said, look, you're not stupid.
Peter, I just think you're such a shining example of what is possible. And I know that there are so many children and so many adults that have been through schooling systems that have felt that they have nothing to contribute, and so many people who continue to struggle. And I love how your work shows that celebrates such a broader view of intelligence. I love that it starts a conversation about the importance of what people can contribute and the importance of being confident and embracing others and being collaborative. I think it's so much, I mean, it's so much more than dancing, isn't it? It's about how we interact and how we relate to each other. And it's a fascinating journey and a fascinating conversation. And Peter, for those teachers that are listening to this, that want to do something with dance, but they don't know where to start. They're trying. I mean, unfortunately, creative arts subjects tend to be the first to go when you've got a busy and overcrowded curriculum, which I think is preposterous. But what advice would you give to those teachers about starting to change the narrative around dance in their classroom?
Well, I'd say see dance like nutrition. So movement provides nutrients. If you they won't be able to learn properly. Well, think about movement in the same way as that we need to allow people the freedom to move, to keep moving, because that will stimulate their mind. If you keep trying to ram stuff into people's heads without letting them move around and letting that, well, it works for some people, but it won't work for everyone, that idea of just sitting them down. So my suggestion would be start small with movement and try to introduce movement into your settings. I'm very happy to engage with teachers. I'm not I've been working in universities for a long time, teaching people over the age of 18. So I'm not an expert in young classrooms. But if somebody wants some advice on how they might introduce movement, then I'm very happy to engage with people in conversations about that. If people want to get in touch, they might say to me, look, I'm teaching a group of 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds, and this is the subject I'm teaching. How could I introduce movement into that setting with that age group? Then I'm very happy to help people find solutions that doesn't require you to put on a Broadway musical in your lunch hour. It's one of those things that you introduce movement into that thing. So people learning about physics, or people learning maths, or people learning history, there are ways of looking at movement and using movement to help unlock that. I did some work with there's a school in Adelaide, and a teacher got in touch, and she was working in an English department. And she had this thing where she was teaching the groups of students English, and they had to do some interaction with each other. But she said one of the problems was when she divided them up into groups to work together in small groups, they spent the first 5 or 6 or 7 minutes of that not being very creative, because as a group they weren't very kind of bonded. So what we did, we worked on some little simple movement exercises that people could do as they got into different groups to break down some of those barriers. And she was reported that things like time on task increased, their creative engagement increased, and therefore what they were doing in the English exercises improved as well. So she found that introducing just a 2-minute movement session, throughout the session, so rather than having a full hour, breaking it into 20-minute sessions, so 18 minutes and 2 minutes of movement in particular ways, had a positive impact on the learning outcomes of the young people. And so I'd be very happy to engage with people in that way. But it's about starting the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I'll make sure that in the show notes I put your links to your website and ways to reach out. That's very kind and very generous of you. Do you have a favorite dance performance or musical, or is that like asking your favorite child? Like, is there something that you go back to time and time again that just speaks to you in wonderful ways?
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, Singing in the Rain.
How can you not love that? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So those sort of things where there's, guys dancing, wearing suits and dancing around. I love that because it looks like it's dancing in a normal way. And it's brilliant. I love free dancing as well. So to see people do flash mobs, I really enjoy watching.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So there's some lovely flash mobs. There's one based in, I think, Chicago, at some in train station there where people are dancing and it's full of joy. And my all-time favorite, there's a music video which I go back to over and over and over again of Beyonce singing live "Crazy in Love." Oh my word! And then she's got some backing dancers. But what I love also is there's loads of shots of the audience also dancing and grooving around too. So to see the joy that comes out of that movement, I love it. What I love is the kind of highly structured, highly trained dancing of Beyonce and her backing dancers, and then the freedom with which the audience respond to that and move their bodies. I love that combination of those two.
I love that. I've been to a number of Taylor Swift concerts. I'm a proud Swiftie, and to see the audience interaction is just absolutely phenomenal. And I'm currently obsessed with Sheeran's song Sapphire,
Oh yeah.
which is a beautiful song. And he is singing in Punjabi, and it's this beautiful display of how music and dance can just transcend culture. And I think just a really nice reminder of how it can bring us all together, regardless of our perceived differences. It has been an absolute joy having a conversation with you. I mean, your passion and your love for dance is infectious, but so much more than that. It's been really wonderful hearing your journey. And thank you for your contribution to the world and everything that you are giving so generously to others. It's been so inspirational to get to talk to you. I can't thank you enough. Thank you.